Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on preparing your business for the post-pandemic future, changes you need to make now. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. And I'm going to be your host, and our presenter is Cliff Emiko. More on Cliff in just a minute, but first a few brief comments on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit partner of the SBA. And locally here in Fairfield County, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services. Cliff, if I could ask you to move the slide. To small business owners, first of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling that you can get by face-to-face, but in today's times, it's actually done by video. And it can also be done by telephone or email. And you can do that by clicking on the bit.ly link you see on the screen, or you can hit the request a mentor link when you go to our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Secondly, we offer a wide range of educational workshops and webinars, roughly about 150 throughout the year. And we offer extensive resources on our website, including access to subject matter experts. Our next live webinar will be next Tuesday, October 27th at noon. The topic is how to accomplish a whole lot more in less time, with Don Wetmore presenting. And you can find more specifics on that webinar on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. We also have on our website a large number of archived webinars, which cover a wide range of business topics that you can find on our website and may be of assistance to you. Now, I want to also let you know that we will have Q&A at the end of the presentation today. So if you want to access Q&A, please hover at the bottom of your screen and click on the chat box there, and you can type your question in at any time, and Cliff will answer those at the end of his prepared remarks. We will end sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website within the next couple of days. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Cliff Emiko. Cliff is a nationally recognized small business legal and tax expert and is best known as the former host of Money Hunt on PBS, where entrepreneurs defended their business plans before America's toughest panel of experts. An attorney and small business consultant based in Fairfield, Connecticut, he has helped launch over 15,000 businesses. Cliff is the author of 16 books, the most recent of which is the Crowdfunding Handbook, How to Raise Capital for Your Business Using Equity Funding Portals. I'll now turn it over to Cliff. Cliff, all yours. You could unmute yourself, Cliff. Cliff, could you unmute yourself? There we go.
There we go. All right. So first of all, thanks, Bob, and that wonderful introduction as always. I always, every time I listen to that, I said, my God, I haven't had much of a life. God, I got to start coming up with some other stuff to do here. But more seriously, though, thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy day, you're mentoring your kids and everything else that you're doing at home now. And have been doing now for the last 6 months, to take an hour out and listen to an attorney yammer around about at least what I see going on in the world today and what the world of small business is going to be looking like for the next 6 months. First of all, if you had any doubt that I am a lawyer, take a look at your current screen. These are the usual disclaimers. We do these at the beginning of every one of our SCORE programs. The most important one really is the first one, which is, there's a very big difference between giving legal information and giving legal advice. There's a big difference between saying this is what the law is all about, which is kind of what we're going to be doing today, and this is what you should do, Joe, and here, Bob, is why you should do something different. That's advice. I really can't give one-on-one advice in a program like this for SCORE or for anybody else. So if you hear something I say and it sounds like a great idea and you do it and it doesn't work out and you fail, your business goes bankrupt, you lose your house, your wife divorces you, the kids stop talking to you, the dog pees on your leg, and you're ending up living in a diaper box under the Brooklyn Bridge, you can't sue anybody. Okay, so that's what the importance of the disclaimer is. 6 months ago, back in April, I did a program for SCORE at the very beginning of the pandemic on, what small businesses should be doing for the next 6 months, and the big goal there was to survive until the fall, because by the fall we'll know a lot more about what the end game is going to look like. Well, it's 6 months later, and the great news that I have for everybody is we still don't really know what the end game is going to look like for the pandemic. My crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but I do have some ideas about, just based on what I read and what I'm seeing in my client in my law practice, what's going on with my small business clients. So I want to talk about, just share some ideas of some things I have learned, some things my clients have taught me, and give you sort of my best guesstimate as to what the next year to 2 years is going to look like. So where are we there yet? Well, there's good news here. The good news is we've passed the crisis point. Part of the big issue that we faced in March and April of last year was that, government, hospitals, our healthcare system were simply not ready for a worldwide pandemic. They simply weren't. That problem has been largely solved. The good news is hospitals, healthcare providers are in a lot better shape now than they were last spring. To the point where some state and local officials are starting to open up the economy a little bit at a time, and taking the risk that there'll be a higher rate of infections, in the hopes that the healthcare system will be able to accommodate them. So that's good news. Last April, I predicted that we're going to see kind of a seesaw for the next year or so, and that definitely proved, that came to pass. Alternating sort of lockdowns with gradual opening ups, and sort of going back and forth between these two scenarios until herd immunity was achieved. That has turned out to happen, although I'm not predicting that, at least in Connecticut and New York, I don't think we're going to be seeing another major lockdown anytime in the near future. I hope I'm right about that. There's even more good news. We probably will have one and possibly more COVID-19 vaccines by the first quarter of next year. Now, whether those will be manufactured in sufficient quantities and distributed, we don't know. But it looks like there are a number of companies, both here in the United States, Pfizer, and also in the UK, and if you believe Russia as well, are very close to having a viable vaccine that works and that will pass regulatory muster by the end of this year or first quarter of next year. But there is bad news. And in the immortal words of George R. Martin, winter is coming. The last couple of months we've had, very pleasant weather. We've been able to get out. We've been able to, get together with friends in a social with a little bit of social distancing. But now we're getting into the cold weather months when people are going to even though there's no government mandated lockdown, we may be voluntarily putting ourselves into lockdown in the hopes of keeping ourselves and our loved ones safe. The more bad news is that even when we have the vaccine, it's probably going to take another 3 to 6 months to manufacture it in sufficient quantities and to distribute it to folks, especially to the folks that there's going to be a big debate about who is going to get the vaccine first. And that's partly a political debate. It's also partly a common sense debate as to, how are we going to get this into people's hands? Who are the people who need it more sooner than others? And that's all going to take time to resolve. Okay. Right now, the pundits, and by the pundits, I talk mostly about the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, are predicting a three-stage recovery. The immediate period is what we're in right now. It's the remainder of 2020. 2020 is basically a write-off. It will be known throughout history as the year of the pandemic, and probably nothing else. Between now and say the middle of next year, we're going to be seeing alternating shutdowns, whether voluntary or government imposed, and reopenings of some kind, gradually relaxing and tightening of the valves that make the economy work. We probably will have a vaccine first quarter of next year. The ban on large gatherings is probably going to remain in effect. I don't think we're going to be seeing gatherings of more than 25, 50 people permitted for at least the next 12 months. And that's bad news for a lot of small businesses that depend on those large gatherings to survive. Travel is a big question mark right now. It is beginning to open up a little bit, but international travel, at least international pleasure travel, is pretty much non-existent at this point. People are not doing the month-long European vacation right now. And there are some reasons for that. I mean, I think in some countries, Americans are still not allowed in some of the European countries because our COVID exposure is worse than it is there. That's going to take time to work itself through. Business travel is happening a little bit. Domestic travel seems to be opening up a little bit more, but it's going to be a while before air traffic returns to 2019 levels. That probably is not going to happen in the next year. Then we have an intermediate period, which is 2021 to 2022. We will be seeing herd immunity at that point, where 40% of the population has either had the disease or has developed antibodies to it, which prevents large scale infections. Um, we will be seeing some travel resuming. I am seeing a lot of brochures from cruise companies and travel people, touting their fall 2021 offerings. So that's a good sign. The travel industry seems to be thinking that the fall of next year, roughly a year from now, we will start seeing travel, returning to COVID levels. But the large gatherings are going to take much longer. I don't think we're going to be seeing mass gatherings of thousands of people or more unless the vaccine gets into people's hands very quickly. And that's the one sort of unknown. If we can get the vaccine in the majority of people's hands by the second quarter of 2021, then I think there'll be more comfort with large scale gatherings, concerts, Broadway, sporting events, and all that kind of stuff. But barring that, I think 2021, at least as far as large gatherings is concerned, is going to be a non-event. And then post-pandemic, and by the way, there's some precedent for this too. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, which is the last one that we had, took about 2 to 3 years before things finally, of course, back then it's very hard to equate that because there were no lockdowns during the Spanish flu epidemic, either because epidemiologists didn't know that lockdowns were helpful, but also more likely, people were just a lot tougher back then. They took death as part of life in a way that we don't. As 21st century people, they were much more fatalistic about life. In a world in which the average, 2 out of 3, babies born did not live to achieve maturity, it's kind of easier to be cavalier about pandemics than in the world that we live nowadays. But it took 2 or 3 years back in 1918 to achieve herd immunity. Even though the economy was not shut down to the same extent as ours is today, the pundits are predicting that by 2022 we'll start seeing a return to normalcy. Travel will be back to normal. Large gatherings will be allowed by that point. Or they will simply be non-existent. I mean, that's a possibility. I really wonder if movie theaters have any future at all. We may not be going to the movies in the future. That's a real possibility. Broadway theater, live theater. I just don't know if those will ever get back to pre-COVID levels. That's a big question mark. Some things are quite simply not going to change. And that's really what this program is all about. What are some of the permanent changes that the COVID pandemic is wreaking on our world? The other thing that I'm seeing in all the pundits is back 6 months ago we were talking about a V-shaped recovery or possibly a W-shaped recovery, but I think the consensus now is that we're going to be seeing more of a K-shaped recovery. The pandemic has generated winners and losers. Big businesses are thriving. I'm indebted to the Wall Street Journal for these statistics. Companies last year issued $1.9 trillion in bond market debt during 2020, which is up from what it was last year pre-COVID. Companies have also raised 185.4 billion in equity offerings during 2020, which is again more than almost twice what it was last year. Big companies are thriving and are getting financing, but small businesses, are hurting in a big way. Again, from the Wall Street Journal, about 1 in 5 small businesses open in January have stopped doing business. And that's from Wombly, which is a polling place. 42% of over 6,000 small business owners surveyed said they were at risk of going out of business during the fourth quarter. One does not want to abuse this word, but what we are seeing in the pandemic is a small business holocaust, and that is not an exaggerated word. And especially the winner is going to tell the tale of what happens with small businesses. On the individual level, there is also a K-shaped recovery. College educated, skilled professionals are surviving, if not thriving. People who've been able to master the technology are doing well, whereas lower income, less skilled or educated people are hurting. People who have to work with their bodies, people who depend on working with others, these are the people who have been really hurt. A stevedore cannot work via Zoom meeting. Okay, just to put it bluntly, and this is sort of interesting. I always like to get philosophical. I always like to take the long view on stuff like this. I was a history and philosophy major in college, not an economics or business major. So I always tend to look at the longer view. And I remember Mark Andreessen, who's a leading Silicon Valley investor, venture capitalist. He was one of the early, he was the founder of Netscape, which was the very first commercial internet browser back in the 90s. He then became one of the early investors in Facebook. The man's not hurting, okay? But he's become kind of a futurist when it comes to technology and stuff like that. And about 10 years ago, I attended a talk of his in New York, and he said something that sort of chilled my blood. But every year, it becomes more and more true. He said, people talk about the middle class and how the middle class is declining in America and how it's disappearing. He says the middle class is not declining. Technology is the new middle class. He said, going forward, we're going to only have, in most advanced, economies, we're only going to have two classes of people. We're going to have an overclass of people who will know how to tell the computers what to do, and then at the bottom, we're going to have an underclass of people who will be told by computers what to do. And I find that, I mean, when he said this, it chilled my blood, but every year his prophecy becomes truer and truer. And obviously, in all things, we want to make sure that we are in the overclass and not in the underclass that's being told how to blow their noses by computers. The impact has varied. Not every small business has been affected equally by the pandemic. Most affected negatively are small businesses that depend for their livelihood on people assembling in one place. Think gyms. Gyms are having a tough time recovering. Bars, restaurants, theaters, people traveling on airplanes or mass transit, airport concessions, limousine services, the storefronts at Grand Central Station. The fast food vendors at the food court. I mean, they're all getting clobbered by this. By people aren't taking Metro North anymore. They're talking about consolidating some of the Metro North stations on the New Haven line for lack of traffic. People going on vacation, travel agents, tanning salons, body waxing, large scale events, vendors and concessionaires at sporting events and rock concerts, people who do t-shirts every time, the Grateful Dead take a stage somewhere. These are the people who are getting hurt. Corporate and commercial landlords, a lot of big companies are realizing now that people working from home is a great idea because they don't have to spend money on real estate anymore. Commercial landlords are going to be clobbered by the pandemic, as virtually all of their tenants are renegotiating leases right now, including many of my clients. I cannot tell you how many hours I have spent the last 6 months renegotiating or terminating leases from my small business clients. And last but not least, less of a concern now than it was 6 months ago, businesses that depend on the physical touching of other people, spas, hairstylists. For the most part, we figured out a way for those people to do what they do via social distancing. So they have been less affected now than they were 6 months ago. We figured out, most hairstylists have figured out how to, and barbers have figured out how to do their thing with social media. Less effective negatively. In fact, what's the famous Shakespeare quote? "Tis an ill wind that blows no one any good." Liquor stores have thrived during the pandemic. If you own a liquor store right now, you are in gravy right now because let's face it, a lot of people are self-medicating. UPS stores, other delivery services, the last, anything to do with the last mile of e-commerce, getting things to and from people's homes, are doing very well. Online retailers are doing extremely well. Retail is going digital. You can quote me on that. I said it 5 years ago and I say it now. Lawyers, accountants, and other professionals are doing quite well. And any kind of a food outlet that focuses on drive-in customer service rather than the sit-down experience. There aren't a whole lot of people who sit down and eat at a McDonald's. Most 90% of their business is takeout or drive-through, and those kind of restaurants are doing okay. Okay, it's the upper scale restaurants that depend on the experience that are hurting. Because obviously you can't experience the experience unless you experience it in person. Okay, so what are some of the long-term changes that are going on due to that are being what are some of the long-term changes that the pandemic is reaching? Well, basically, the pandemic hasn't so much changed things as it's speeded them up. The pandemic has turbocharged some economic and social changes that were already underway and that have been underway for the last decade. Specifically, the increased use of technology to communicate and conduct business. Okay, maybe 6 months ago we didn't know what a Zoom meeting was, but more and more we are conducting business and communicating via our smartphones and our technology rather than one-on-one in-person communication. Brick and mortar retail has been giving way to e-commerce for some time, but now that has been turbocharged by the pandemic. Similarly, brick and mortar offices are giving way to remote work and virtual companies. Virtual companies are not a new thing where there is no office. There is no physical location. There are 10 people, they all work out of their homes, and they communicate electronically via the internet. We're seeing an explosion of these kind of companies right now. Increasing sensitivity to health, safety, and the environment. This is a big one. 6 months ago, I used to laugh at the hand sanitizers in the supermarket and the people who wore masks on airplanes. I am not laughing at that now. I am using them. Especially when it comes to technology, one of the biggest sea changes, and you're tempted to laugh, but it's not a joke. I actually heard somebody say we are all millennials now. Everyone. A year ago, we used to tease millennials all the time for being on their smartphones constantly and doing stuff. Now we are all millennials. Even what the pandemic has done is it has turned baby boomers, my generation, into technophiles, people who love technology. I didn't know what a Zoom meeting was 6 months ago. Now I have a Venmo account. I have a Zelle account. I didn't know what these things were 30 days ago, but my clients want to pay me that way, so I have opened accounts with these. They're online payment services. Now I want to know the latest thing that is coming out, and I'm jumping on it, even as a baby boomer who's circling the drain. Like the millennials of old, we are now, all of us, living on our smartphones and laptops. We're buying everything online. We're ordering takeout food. We're living in our basements. So, that's, I think, a major change. Okay, so how are your customers changing? How are your customers looking at the world differently than they were 6 months ago? Well, to understand this slide, I need you to go to my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. It's got over 40 videos. They're all about an hour long. Some of these programs, this program that I'm doing now, will be on YouTube within the next week sometime. If you go to youtube.com and search for Cliff Hennico How to Sell, you will see my award-winning 1-hour video, which I did for SCORE, on how to sell just about anything to just about anybody. One of my key points that I make in that video is that when you're talking about customers, you're not talking about needs and wants. You're talking about fears and passions. How do your products and services turn people on? How do they help people sleep better at nights? Those are the two things that people care about more than anything else when they look to buy products and services. And the key to any successful small business is to understand your customers' fears and passions and how you should be targeting them. People still have fears and passions, but they're not the same as they were 6 months ago. And here are some of the changes that I'm seeing in my world. A heightened sensitivity to health and safety. Like I said, people will still be wearing masks even after the government tells us that it's okay to take them off. People will be avoiding crowds and close proximity with others. The subways in New York, you can actually walk from one end of a subway car to another without touching another human being. That was never the case in the history of the US subway system, of the New York City subway system. People will be moving from overcrowded big cities to suburban rural settings, at least in the short term. I think they're going to be doing that. They're going to be worried about mobs and the health of this. I mean, you can still walk from one end. I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, I actually was in New York a couple of months ago, and you could actually walk 5 blocks up the middle of Fifth Avenue without being threatened by another vehicle. That to me is amazing. That has never happened in the history of New York. Greater awareness of health risks while traveling. I myself got very, very sick about 3 years ago. I think that, in fact, I suspect that I had one of the COVID viruses, probably SARS. I was in misery for about 2 months, couldn't taste or smell anything, which for me is a big issue. I had pneumonia. I mean, all the symptoms, I checked all the boxes, and I'm convinced it was because I had to take a long plane ride. I was in the same plane for 7 hours. And I just was breathing that recycle there. I'm sure that's what gave me that disease, whatever happened. Next time I fly, I am wearing a mask in plain English. Greater volatility in the job markets too. A lot of people are concerned not just about unemployment, but unemployability and irrelevance. I mean, what does a software engineer at Google do when he or she is laid off? I mean, if you're a waiter and you get laid off, there are a lot of other things you can do. But when you're a software industry, or if you're a lawyer whose specialty is 5 sections of the Internal Revenue Code, what do you do when you lose your job? The fear is not going to be so much about unemployment as permanent unemployment and irrelevance. I heard this is background conversation. I was buying something at a local store, and somebody in the background, I said, it's getting to the point that out of work actors can't even get jobs as waiters anymore. And that just stuck in my head, the old cliche of an out of work actor, they always work wait jobs and, low level service job while they're between, gigs, while they're between auditions. What does an out of work actor do? They can't be a waiter at a restaurant anymore. What are these people going to do? Also, too, an increased there's growing concern in the scientific community about this. Increased dependence on technology leads to fear of isolation and being disconnected from family, friends, and the world in large. Look at your friends and your neighbors and see what the pandemic has done to them. People are not as happy as they were 6 months ago. They're tired, they're burned out from what's been going on the last 6 months. I mean, living this way puts a lot of psychological pressure on people. And I think these are long-term changes. I mean, they're going to be doing studies for the next 100 years on how the pandemic affected today's school children and their educational and behavioral and cognitive performance. So that's fears. Now your customers' passions are also changing. In troubled times, people seek escapes from reality. It's no secret that some of the most classic movies that came out of Hollywood in the last 100 years came out during the Great Depression. And some of the most famous comics comedians became famous. People want escape from reality, but they will be consuming them individually. It's hard to believe, but 20 years ago, a prominent Harvard sociologist named Robert Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And it's probably one of the most controversial books that's been done in the last 20, 30 years. He basically said people are still doing things the way they did 50, 60 years ago, but they're not doing them as organized communities. They're doing them as loners. Back when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s, you belonged to a bowling league. Every middle class, mom and dad belonged to at least one, sometimes more, bowling league, and they bowled at least once or twice a week. Well, bowling is still a very popular sport, but there are no bowling leagues anymore. People bowl individually or with their families. They don't belong to organized leagues where they meet people who are different than themselves. And this is going to be a major, again, this is not changing, it's being turbocharged by the pandemic. Live theater almost certainly will be replaced by webcast. People will not be comfortable sitting in a large room with total strangers watching something happening on stage. Movies, opera, concerts are going to go 100% streaming. You can get virtually any opera on DVD nowadays. You absolutely can. Virtually all the operas that have been written in the last 400 years exist in at least one or more DVD formats or beta. Or, I'm sorry, Blu-ray. You can get these, and they're relatively cheap. Go on Amazon, go on eBay, you'll find them. Video games and VR simulations will attract older generations. Again, a major sea change with the pandemic. It has forced baby boomers, Gen Xers, and older people to adopt technology and embrace it the same way that younger generations have for the last 10, 15 years. I'm actually looking at virtual reality for some of the things my clients are doing. People are more house proud than they were last year. I think this is a major change. People are focused on their homes. If you have ever been to a Home Depot or a Lowe's in the last couple of months, they are packed with people. People are doing do-it-yourself projects. My contractor clients are 6 months ago, I was worried about my contractor clients. I am not worried about them now. They're booked solid till next summer. You try to get, a major, like a deck. You want to take your deck and make it into sort of like a year-round thing. Try finding a contractor. You're going to have to wait till next summer probably to get that job done in Fairfield County. Self-medication is on the upswing. Liquor, marijuana, whoever wins the White House this year, I think that we're going to see major marijuana legalization next year. It's going to happen. Recreational marijuana will be legalized in the United States within the next 12 months. It's one of my predictions, regardless of who wins the White House. Elder care is being onboarded by families. There's a perception that nursing homes now are death traps because of COVID. Many people who have elder relatives are looking for ways that they can bring them on board. I have some clients that do senior care services, in-home senior care, and they are just exploding right now. They can't find caregivers fast enough to meet the demand for families that want, a full-time person, living at home taking care of their elderly loved ones. Hobbies, crafts, do it yourself, all on an upswing. The art market is up, which I find bizarre. People paying $5 million for paintings and stuff like that. That is, I'm told that Sotheby's and Christie's, their markets are up this year because collectors are focusing. I mean, they're probably hoping to get bargains, but people are spending money on luxury goods. They're pampering themselves. People will pay for convenience. Boy, now that's been going ever since the internet hit us in the early 90s. We've known this. People will pay for convenience. They will pay to have things delivered to their home. They will pay to have things, on their computers rather than having to go somewhere and do things. This last one I'm not so sure about, but there's a lot of talk about B2B supply chains are going to become more domestic than international. Coinciding with the pandemic is an increasing distrust of China and the People's Republic of China and its motivations and what it's trying to do. There are a lot of people on both sides of the political divide right now who think that the Chinese do not have our best interests in mind and are looking to seek supply chains that are not China based. There's a lot there. There are some people who are predicting, I'm not one of them, that the pandemic will bring manufacturing back to the United States. I'm not as sanguine about that. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see that. I'm a big fan of American manufacturing. A lot of the problems we have in our economy right now are based on the fact that we are no longer a manufacturing economy. We need to get manufacturing back here, but I don't think the pandemic is going to be enough to do it. Quite frankly, when people get hooked on lower prices of buying from Asia, they tend to stay there. They're not going to pay 300% more in labor costs to have things manufactured, at least basic goods manufactured in the United States. So that's the thing. Quick question: if supply chains do localize, what do you foresee as the pricing and labor costs? Well, with unemployment right now being around 15%, I would hope that at least for the short term, that there would be some flexibility on labor costs. But because of what's going on in the next slide, I don't think that's going to happen. To be honest with you, if the Democrats take the White House, and especially if they take the Senate as well, you're going to see increases in the minimum wage. You're going to see a greater focus on union labor. Um, there are forces at work, political forces, that are going to prevent manufacturing costs in the United States from being anywhere near what they are in Asia. That's one of the reasons. And again, that's just my opinion. I'm editorializing. I should always flag when I do that. I'm not as sanguine. Believe me, I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see nothing more than a wave of manufacturing returning back to the United States and helping to achieve full employment. But I think the long-term benefits of having supply come from Asia, maybe not China, but Vietnam, Bangladesh, India. I think there's, that's, you're never going to get that back again. You're just not. Okay, government is changing. And this is an important point here. Regardless of who wins the White House this November, okay, taxes are going to skyrocket, especially for upper income folks. This is unavoidable. Unfortunately, all of the pandemic relief programs that were passed this year, including the new one that may be passed this week, even as we speak, somebody is going to have to pay for those. The federal budget deficit tripled in the last year. That's amazing when you think about that. Taxes are going to skyrocket. Government spending is going to skyrocket, and there's going to be increased funding for the IRS, which is leading to more audits of small businesses. The very same issue of the Wall Street Journal that gave me my statistics on how bad small business is doing that I presented earlier, 2 pages after that article on how small businesses are suffering during the pandemic, there was an article by the Wall Street Journal's tax journalist about how small businesses cheat on their taxes and how small business owners are more likely than anybody else to play games on their taxes and to take advantage of loopholes that there's going to be a lot of political pressure to close next year. So for example, those of you who have LLCs that are taxed as S Corps, you play the game of dividing your income between salary and distribution of profit so you can save money on your FICA and Medicare taxes. There are a lot of people in Washington who consider these to be loopholes that need to be closed. I am told that there is a $2 trillion gap between the amount of money that the federal tax code requires be collected and the amount that the IRS is actually collecting. We're not talking about a law change here. We're talking about a lot of people avoiding taxes, some legally, some not so legally. And there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, to end that. Whoever wins the White House this November, you're going to see an increased funding for the IRS, and you're going to see more audits of small business and possibly also closing some of the loopholes in the tax laws. And some of these aren't new loopholes. I mean, it's no secret. Joe Biden is on record as saying that one of the things he wants to do is he wants to eliminate the preferential rate for capital gains tax. He wants to tax capital gains at the same time as at the same rate as ordinary income. Those of you who are thinking possibly of selling a business next year, keep a weather eye on who wins the White House and what happens with that. Right now, long-term capital gains is taxed as 15%. Ordinary income is taxed at close to 40%. Joe Biden at least is on record as saying that he wants to eliminate that gap and charge 40% on everything. So these are the kinds of changes you have to look at going forward. Okay, so we've talked about some of the changes. Let's talk about the pandemic pivot. What should you be doing now? Okay, there are 3 basic strategies here. You can refocus your marketing, you can refocus your operations, and this isn't really an or, you should at least consider a portfolio career. So let's talk about the first set of strategies, refocus your marketing. You're not changing your business here. You're not going into a different business, but you're changing your marketing. You may be focusing on different people. and maybe looking for new customers, but it doesn't necessarily mean new people. As I said earlier, your customers' fears and passions are changing, and you need to refocus your marketing to concentrate on the new normal. What are your customers, passionate about today? What are they fearing today? Where are their anxieties? So if you have a restaurant or bar, okay, take advantage of the increasing desire to escape, pampering, special occasions. Focus on special occasions. There's nobody in your restaurant. Offer discounts for birthday parties or funerals. Call all the local funeral parlors and say, if people want to have a lunch after the burial, you'll give them a break. We'll close the restaurant down. We'll just have the 10 people there. That we'll do social distancing. Take advantage of that. Food to people that can't prepare at home. People are cooking more at home. They're baking bread. People, baby boomers with Ivy League degrees are baking bread. This is an amazing thing that is happening right now. Okay, so if you're a bakery, I wouldn't focus so much on the basic rye bread or the challah or that kind of stuff, because people are doing that at home. Focus on the stuff that they can't get, the more exotic stuff, where they'll actually pay and maybe even visit your store to get. If you're a contractor, focus on year-round porches. A lot of people during the summer have been using their porches as gathering places, and they want that to continue during the winter months. I have at least 3 neighbors right now that are looking to do this specific project. They're taking their outdoor space and making it usable year round. Find a way to get that work. If you're an interior designer, I represent several interior designers, customized home offices. We want to look professional now when we are doing our Zoom meetings. What should the background look like? What tchotchkes should be on your desk? Believe it or not, people will pay you for advice on how best to do that. Travel, event businesses. Airbnb did a major pivot. A year ago, they were focused mostly on international travel, on renting apartments in Paris and Rome and places like that. Now they discovered most people are looking to get out of the big cities and spend 6 months in the suburbs or maybe an exurb of New York State. Dutchess County, Ulster County, Orange County, these are the southern Catskills, have seen a major influx of temporary visitors from New York City who just want to get away from the city until things calm down. So they're focusing now on local regional getaways. Driving, RV rentals are up, recreational vehicles. Hey, the kids are going to be attending school virtually anyway. Well, let's just pack them in. Let's travel around the country. Let's see the Grand Canyon, and they can still do their math lesson in the afternoon. People are doing this. Bakeries, liquor infused baked goods, the kind of things that people aren't going to do on their own. Spas, forget the vacation tan. Scare people, focus on increased vitamin D and escape pampering. People used to refer about lawyers' pallor, lawyers who look gray as ghosts. Well, people are talking now about pandemic pallor. If I were doing any kind of a spa or that kind of a business, I'd be saying, hey, lose your pandemic pallor. Look like you just came back from Florida, even though you didn't. You didn't go. Clothing and boutique, it's all going to be online. Retail is going to be online. Get over it. It's happening. Embrace the internet. Embrace Amazon and eBay. Okay, the second set of strategies involve refocusing your operations. This is the way in which you do business. Again, maybe you're not changing your market. Maybe you're still doing your marketing the way you've always done it. But refocusing your operation can be another way to pivot. Change the way you do business. Home delivery and curbside pickup. It's not just for restaurants anymore. People will pay to pick up packages at the UPS store and assemble things for you. Believe it or not, people are paying money to people who are doing this. Nobody wants to go anywhere and do shopping anymore. If you need a set of basement shelves, you can hire somebody in the neighborhood to go not only pick this up for you, but assemble it and bring it down to your basement, like a home handy person. Consider phasing out in-person meetings entirely in favor of digital and virtual meetings. Let's face it, we all know, those of us who remember working in offices, 90% of all in-person meetings are utterly wastes of time. And we all know this. One of the things the pandemic is doing is it's forcing businesses to operate more efficiently. They don't schedule meetings now unless there's a damn good reason to do them. And that is leading them to realize two things. Number one, we need less people. Number two, we can function with less real estate. And those are going to be two major changes in the world of corporate America. You're going to be seeing a lot less physical locations, more focusing on virtual operations. The retail store of today is the catalog showroom of tomorrow. I don't know if anybody in the audience remembers Captain Video. Captain Video was one of the very first video rental chains. They came out in the very early the very early 1980s. They got wiped out when Blockbuster came along in the early 90s. But the way Captain Video worked, they didn't stock videos. There was a small store with only maybe a couple of hundred square feet. You'd walk in and there were a bunch of catalogs there of videos. You'd look through the catalogs, you'd pick the video you want. There would always be one person there. You'd tell the person the video you wanted. They would order the video and they would have it Federal Expressed to your home. And you had X days to watch it. And then at the end of the X days, you would send it back. They would send you the return packaging that you would send it back. Very primitive way to do business. But the catalog showroom is coming back. In fact, Amazon is investing in these. They're actually investing in storefronts that will only be catalogs of their merchandise. You can't there is no inventory. There's no storage there. You just simply select the merchandise. You talk to the salespeople, you figure out which model of iPhone is the best for you, and you order it and it gets shipped to you. That model is coming back, incidentally. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing. If brick and mortar retail does survive the next decade, it's going to survive in this form as a catalog showroom. Consider doing away with brick and mortar entirely. I just read in the paper yesterday that Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, who of course got kicked out of his company earlier this year, he now is investing in a real estate business to set up ghost kitchens around the country. These are not restaurants. You can't eat there. These are simply kitchens where people, create food and you order online and it's delivered to you. You cannot sit there. You cannot eat there. There's no wait staff. Other than the 2 or 3 cooks and maybe one person who deals with the drivers, that's all you have here. And they can operate with a minimum of real estate. I understand that he's actually investing in a nationwide operation of ghost kitchens, which I find that fascinating. Is there an international market for what you make or do? Now is the time to start looking for business in other countries. You'd be surprised. There is a huge market in Brazil for things that you cannot even give away here in the United States. Start looking, put some things up on eBay, look what's selling on eBay in other countries, and ask yourself, do I have anything that I can offer somebody in Zimbabwe and get paid for it? Now is the time to look international if you're doing retail. Theaters and comedy clubs, go virtual, go nationwide, go YouTube. That is the future. People are not going to be going to comedy clubs, smoke-filled comedy clubs, hot places in the middle of the night. Not going to happen anymore. Then last but not least, consider a portfolio career. There's no law that requires you to do only one thing to make money. What other products and services do your customers need? My wife and I needed a handyman about a week ago to do a few jobs around our house. It's a person we've worked with before. We've stayed in touch with him. He came over and the first thing he did was he handed my wife a half a dozen eggs. Apparently, we didn't even know this, but he apparently had a couple of chickens in his backyard and he decided to make that into a side business. So now we're ordering eggs from this guy because we like him. We want to keep him in business and all that. So here's a guy who's an Uber driver, a home handy person, and a chicken farmer, and he's doing okay. He's surviving. He's not rich, but he's surviving. He's getting through the pandemic. Think, what other products and services do your customers need? Whatever you're doing in your portfolio career, these things should be complementary. If you have a hobby, turn it into a business. If you love collecting stamps, become a stamp dealer. There's no license required. There's no experience required. If you know something about stamps and you think you can, make money selling, rare stamps to collectors, become a stamp dealer. Turn your hobby into a dealership. Or if you love antiques, become an antiques dealer. Virtual, of course. Do some consulting work for local businesses. If you know anything at all about running a business, chances are there's somebody in your neighborhood that needs your advice and that doesn't know what you know. Take advantage of that. Become a consultant. Again, no license required, no experience required. Freelance journalism. If you enjoy writing, if you're good at writing, I just gave this advice to a friend of mine the other day. There are over 100 websites where you can sign up to do freelance journalism. There are lots of publications like the Wisconsin Journal of Left-Handed Electrical Engineers that are always looking for articles on 3 ways you can survive the pandemic, 3 ways you can build your electrical engineering business as a solo consultant. And they look for writers on these sites. You do not have to be a journalist. You do not have to have a journalism degree. If you know how to write and if you can bang out copy on deadline, sign up with some of these sites, and you won't get rich, but you might get like an extra $500 to $1,000 a month doing this stuff. Offer your body, okay, not legally. Okay, offer your body legally. Offer yourself as a delivery. We all have a cars. We all have a body. Okay. If you don't know what else to do with yourself, there are people in your neighborhood that will pay you. A client of mine operates a maid service. During the pandemic, of course, his business dropped to nothing because people were afraid of having, people in their homes. Now that's coming back a little bit because the maids wear masks and all that kind of stuff. They're doing social distancing. But what he discovered was that while they weren't willing to hire his maids to clean their houses, they were looking for people that would actually do their grocery shopping for them, especially elderly people who were at risk. Say, well, look, I don't want a maid, but I really need someone to go do my grocery shopping, and I don't trust Instacart. Can one of your maids, I'll pay them their normal hourly rate. Would they do these things for me? Or would they help me reorganize my basement? Or will they pick up something for me, that's sitting sitting at the UPS store? So he kind of pivoted a little bit that way, although he's coming back now and doing the maid service now because that's coming back. Consider getting a real estate license. A year ago at this time in Fairfield, uh, 2 out of 3 homes had a for sale sign in front of them. Now there is hardly any. New Yorkers are moving to Fairfield County in droves. Real estate prices are going through the roof here in Fairfield County. Get a real estate license. You sell 1 or 2 homes a year, you can live on that in Fairfield County, and the license isn't hard to get. Consider buying a franchise, not a brick and mortar. This is not the time to buy a restaurant franchise. The franchises you're looking for now are service franchises, UPS stores, ServPro. They do janitorial cleaning, closets by design, home organizing. Again, tie into the changes that are in people's fears and passions. People want to do more now in their houses. Help them buy a franchise that provides a service that helps people to do more in their homes, whatever that may be. And then, if worse comes to worse, now is the time. If you're a baby boomer that is afraid of technology, and you haven't a clue what all these things like Facebook are all about, now is the time to go back to school, spend a little money, and learn how to code and become and join the technology revolution. There are, in virtually every city in the United States now, there are coding academies that for a fee will teach you how to code software for the most popular programs. Graduates of these schools get jobs, usually job offers before they even graduate. These are usually 5 to 10 week programs. And by the time you reach the end of the 10 weeks, you probably will have a job offer in your pocket, because a lot of early stage technology companies eat engineers, and they need them like Dracula needs blood, and we don't have enough of them in this country. Consider going back to school, sign up for a coding academy. They cost about 5-6 thousand bucks. Learn how to code a particular program, and guarantee you will be able to parlay that into a job in the emerging big internet that is evolving in this country. Okay. And then, now this hasn't changed in 6 months, and I'm going to yell at you just like I did 6 months ago. Prepare, spend a little time, and prepare for the next crisis. We were, as a nation, caught with our pants down in March of this year. Nobody expected this. Shame on us for not taking a little time out of our life and prepare for something like this. We would have gotten through this a lot better if we had been better prepared. When things do get better, when we get into the intermediate phase next year, when the market really starts to open up again, make it your priority to establish a cash reserve equal to 6 months basic operating expenses. Get some lines of credit and don't use them. Keep them handy in case you need them. Apply for 3 credit cards you never intend to use. Expand your online products and service offerings, and diversify your suppliers so you're not as dependent on a single company or location. Um, Again, I'm going to point you to one of my YouTube videos. It's called 3 Personality Traits Every Successful Entrepreneur Must Develop. And the one that's most controversial, and that I always get pushback on when I do this talk live, is being ruthless. In tough economic times, whatever the cause, it's the business owners who are not afraid to be utterly ruthless, who are willing to do outrageous, crazy, creative, in-your-face things. Everything short of breaking the law. Don't ever break the law, but anything short of that is fair game, to protect their businesses and keep them alive. These are the people who are most likely to survive and come back stronger than ever. Okay, it's no secret that during tough times, the world gets entrepreneurial, and that's when you see a lot of new businesses, new business models get started. Okay, so to summary, the new normal will likely take 1 to 3 years to arrive, and you frankly can't wait until then. You got to do something now. Some changes in the way your customers view the world are likely to be permanent. We don't know which ones yet, but I think that the increased health consciousness and the increasing focus on the home as the center of the world, those I think are going to be semi-permanent, at least for the next few decades. Your business plan needs to take into account almost certain dramatic increases in taxes. Regardless, I mean, I don't get political in these programs, but whoever wins the White House this fall, and whoever wins the Senate, you're going to see increases in taxes, especially if you make over 400,000 a year. You're going to be seeing that. Take a close look at your current customers and changes in their fears and passions that are likely to last, and prepare to pivot your business by refocusing your market, your operations, or consider a portfolio career where you do 3 or 4 things to make a living, and somehow they all give you enough money that you can scrape through. Read Aesop's famous short story, The Grasshopper and the Ant, and resolve to be better prepared for the next global pandemic. And remember, it's a jungle out there. That's a famous Randy Newman song. It was the theme song for the Monk series of murder mysteries. The more ruthless you are, the more likely you are to survive. And with that, I wish you all good luck. Let's take some questions. This is my contact information, and I'll turn the floor back to Bob. I think we still have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, we do. We do have about 5 minutes or so for questions. So we'll take as many as we can in the next 5 minutes. A reminder, if you want to submit a question, you can do it through the chat box by hovering on the bottom of your screen. And we do have a couple of questions in the queue already. So I'll start with those.
Well, this is interesting. What do you foresee with the antitrust issues of big internet? I guess the question that I would pose back is, why do you care? I mean, how is that going to help you run a better small business? I don't get that. I mean, I'm happy to offer you my thoughts. Again, my crystal ball is no better than anybody else's. There's a bipartisan consensus that some of the big tech companies in the United States have become too big. The usual suspects: Amazon, Google, Facebook, and these people. Here's the issue with antitrust. The antitrust cases are going to be very, very interesting. I just read in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that the Justice Department's going after Google. The problem is this: there's no question that these companies are incredibly big. And in the case of Amazon, it's putting its tenterhooks out in just about every sector of the economy. But there are 2 big questions when it comes to antitrust lawsuits. Number one is, are they abusing that monopoly power? It isn't just enough to be big. You can have a monopolist. Monopolies are not per se illegal. in the United States. They only are illegal if they are abusing that monopoly power to stifle competition. And there are some issues. I mean, Jeff Bezos is saying with a straight face that nothing he does stifles competition. In fact, if anything, he facilitates competition. Now, anyone who's ever opened a third party seller account on Amazon knows that's not completely true. Amazon does compete with you when you sell online as a third party seller. And, that's where the government's going to be thrusting its case is focusing on those kinds of behaviors. But the other thing too is that if a monopoly does not have an anti-competitive effect, then it is harmless and is usually allowed to continue. One of the big arguments that the big tech companies are saying is, hey, wait a minute, you say we're a monopoly, but then how come if we're a monopoly, then why aren't prices going through the roof? If we're a monopoly, then we can charge whatever we want for our products, our services. Why doesn't internet access cost $50,000 a month? The answer is it's going the opposite way. The bigger we get, the more we pass our cost savings onto the consumer. The consumer benefits by our size, and that is a pretty compelling argument. I mean, Facebook to this day does not charge for a Facebook page. So how can a consumer say that they're being harmed because Facebook is this huge, octopus-like monopoly? It's going to be tricky. The antitrust cases are not going to be easy ones because when it comes to tech monopolies behave differently than manufacturing monopolies do. And I think that's the thing. The antitrust laws all date from the period from 1890 to 1910, when we were in the middle of our industrial revolution. And those were the kinds of monopolies that they were looking to break up. Tech monopolies do not behave the same as manufacturing monopolies do. And I think that's where the legal analysis is going to get very interesting. So there's my input for what it's worth.
Unfortunately, Cliff, we're out of time, and that's all the time we're going to have for questions. I just want to remind people that this webinar has been recorded, and the materials will be available on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, within the next couple of days. And our next live webinar will be on Tuesday, October 27th at noon, and the topic is how to accomplish a whole lot more in less time, with Don Wetmore presenting. Again, if you want to take advantage of our free individual counseling, you can click the link on the screen or go to our website. And on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our live webinar today. And in particular, a big thank you to Cliff Emico for presenting. So stay well, everyone, and have a great day.